Hello everyone, welcome to the Bajirao IAS Academy Daily News Analysis. So today is 18th July 2024 and in this session we will be discussing few important articles that were given in different newspapers. So we'll try to discuss them in a detailed manner so that this discussion will be helpful for your upcoming examinations. So before discussing all these important articles one by one, let's try to discuss yesterday given one prelims practice question. The question was with respect to Operation Shakti and Operation Smiling Buddha. So Operation Shakti and Operation Smiling Buddha are related to which of the following things, and that was the question that I have asked. The options are A. Combined operations against Naxalites, left-wing extremists. Option B. Capture of Golden Temple. Option C. India's nuclear bomb test. And option D. Fleeing Hindus and Buddhists from Afghanistan. So the correct answer for this question is option C. It is India's nuclear bomb test. Operation Shakti and Operation Smiling Buddha are two nuclear bomb tests that were conducted by India to showcase the world India's nuclear capabilities. So therefore, it is very important that you have to remember this particular question. And when we look into the explanation of Operation Buddha and Operation Smiling Buddha and Operation Shakti, the Operation Smiling Buddha was first conducted in 18th May 1974 under the Prime Ministership of Indira Gandhi. And in fact, Operation Smiling Buddha is an assigned code for that particular military exercise. And in fact, India's first successfully conducted nuclear bomb test is Operation Smiling Buddha. And in fact, this nuclear bomb was detonated on the Indian Army base at Pokhran in Rajasthan. Right? You have to remember this test is also known as Pokhran test of Rajasthan. It was conducted in Rajasthan by Indian Army under the supervision of several Indian military generals. So therefore, Operation Smiling Buddha is related to nuclear bomb test that India conducted for the first time successfully. And again, Operation Shakti, so that was conducted in May 13, 1998 under the Prime Ministership of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So it include two further fission bombs. They were detonated as part of Operation Shakti, and it was led by Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And in fact, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee declared that now India will be a full-fledged nuclear state after Operation Shakti was successfully conducted. And in fact, India performed this Operation Shakti to display its nuclear power, nuclear capability, and also establish itself as a nuclear armed nation. So these are the two significant codes for India's nuclear bomb tests: Operation Smiling Buddha, that was first conducted, and Operation Shakti, that was conducted later. So this was about the Operation Smiling Buddha and Operation Shakti. And today also I have one more important prelims practice question. And in fact, so UPSC already asked about these things. UPSC asked about THAAD. So therefore, which of the following air defense systems are correctly matched? So Iron Dome of Israel, S-400 missile defense system of Russia, THAAD of USA, and Iron Beam India. So options are given here. So select the correct option and try to answer this question in the comment section, and I will provide you the correct answer in the next class. So without any delay, let's start our discussion with the first very important article: right track to cut post-harvest losses. Right. So when we talk about Indian agriculture, one of the aspect which has been plaguing Indian agriculture, which has been creating food security challenges, which has been minimizing the productivity, and which has also impacting the incomes of the farmers, that was post-harvest losses. And in fact, India is a country with a huge post-harvest losses. After harvesting the produce, farmers are actually reporting a huge losses in their produce. This is in fact is associated with a number of reasons, so we will discuss those reasons as well. However, when we talk about the consequences of post harvest losses, as I have already told you, it would create food security challenges. Food security challenges. Scarcity of food leads to food driven inflation or food inflation, and in case food prices increases, poor people cannot afford food, and that would lead to hunger, poverty, malnutrition among the poor people. And apart from these things, it would also substantially impact agricultural production and farmers incomes as well. Agri production and even farmers income. Farmers income as well. So therefore it is very important that we need to look into the actual reasons of the post harvest losses, how to plug these post harvest losses. It is very important. India in fact ranks a second in terms of global agricultural production. So if you look at the total agricultural production, India ranks second in the world. However, its share in the global agricultural exports is only just 2.4%. So this is a very low rate of exports from India. So this indicating that India exports a very less amount of agricultural goods to other parts of the world, because India's agricultural exports to the world agri exports is just 2.4%, and this placing India at the 8th position in the world. However, this can be attributed to the several factors, and those factors include lower productivity. Because of the lower productivity, farmers would not have adequate surplus to export to other countries, and even the inability to meet desired quality standards. For example, when we are importing agricultural products to other countries such as Japan, South Korea and European Union countries, and even US in North America, so our agricultural products have to meet certain quality standards, and very often our agricultural products failed to meet sanitary and phytosanitary measures in those countries, and that has led to the rejection of Indian agricultural products. And therefore this inability to meet desired quality standards is also another impediment in agricultural exports, or boosting agricultural exports to other countries. And apart from that, we have also been facing inefficiencies with respect to the supply chain management. We do not have a robust supply chain management that would connect farmers to consumers, that would connect rural areas or agricultural production centers with the markets. So therefore supply chain management is also very important, but we do not have a robust supply chain linkages that has leading to the post harvest losses. So these are the major factors we could say that has been leading to the post harvest losses. However, so if we look the data about the agriculture production post harvest losses that have been taking place in India, so India's total post harvest losses actually amounts to rupees 1,52,790 crore annually. So in fact this number is a very huge. So around 1,52,790 crore worth of agricultural produce would be lost every year. Imagine that the same amount of money, how it could benefit the farmers, right? So one thing that we must understand here is that farmers have been significantly and substantially losing their income because of the post harvest losses, and therefore it is very important that we must minimize these post harvest losses to benefit the farmers, to address the food security challenges, to control the food inflation. All these things are effectively dependent on regulating or controlling the post-harvest losses in the agriculture sector. Now we will understand India's post-harvest losses in a much more detailed manner. When we talk about the post-harvest losses in the Indian agriculture, these post-harvest losses are maximum in the perishable commodities. For example, fruits, vegetables. So they can be considered as a perishable items. So if we don't sell them to the consumers within a specific period of time, so they can perish. And farmers would not earn any income from such perishable commodities, unlike rice, wheat, pulses. So they are not perishable commodities, but vegetables, fruits, they can be considered as a perishable items. So majority of the post-harvest losses, or the biggest loss for the farmers, is reported from the perishable commodities. So these perishable commodities essentially included eggs, fish, meat, fruits, and vegetables. So you can also see the proportion of the loss that these different perishable items are associated. However, so what needs to be done so that we can reduce the post-harvest losses? We must think about this aspect also. Because 1,52,790 crore is not a small amount. It could benefit farmers significantly. So therefore we must find out solutions, and those solutions would address the post-harvest losses that the farmers have been facing in India. So for that to happen, initially we have discussed that we do not have a robust supply chain management. In any supply chain management, the agri-logistics would play most important role. So these agri-logistics play an important and crucial role by linking the agri-production centers with the markets, with the urban centers, with the consumers, with the supermarkets. So therefore we have to focus on these agri-logistics. So when we have a robust and strengthened agri-logistics, these perishable goods can be immediately taken to the markets, consumers, and the urban centers, thereby substantially minimizing the losses. And in fact, there was a committee called Doubling Farmers' Income, Committee on Doubling Farmers' Income by 2022. Initially, the government aimed to double the farmers' income by 2022, and that committee was also known as Ashok Dalwai Committee. Right? So that particular committee is also known as Ashok Dalwai Committee. And this Ashok Dalwai Committee had recommended that we need to strengthen agri-logistics, and it should be considered as a top priority to reduce the post-harvest losses and to benefit farmers by improving their incomes. Because once farmers harvested their produce, farmers are able to take their produce to the nearby urban markets, nearby supermarkets, and they have to sell their produce to the consumers. Only then we could reduce the post-harvest losses that was recommended by Ashok Dalwai Committee. So therefore strengthening agri-logistics should be a top priority of the government. However, when we talk about the logistics, these logistics involves a multiple logistics requirements. So these multiple logistic requirements would be very often part of a single supply chain of agri commodities. Right? So when we talk about the supply chain of agri commodities, generally start from first mile transport from farm gate to the nearby mandi. So farmers have to transport the agricultural produce from the farm gate to the nearby mandi, wholesale or retail, or wholesale transportation by rail, road, water, or even air network, in case if it involves export of these agriculture produce, agriculture goods to other countries. And even last mile transportation to the consumers would also be part of the supply chain. So therefore, when we are talking about the strengthening of agri-logistics, we need to think about the whole supply chain, right from the farm gate up to the consumer. So that particular thing must be strengthened in order to minimize the post-harvest losses. However, if you look at the farmer profile in India, 86% of India's total farmers are small and marginal farmers. So they have a very small land holdings, and because of that reason 86% of India's farmers are small and marginal farmers. However, most of these farmers are very often struggling to attain the economy of scale due to a small production. They used to have a small production. So most of their produce they use for their consumption, right? So they use for their consumption, and they do not have adequate or surplus produce that they can sell. Even if they have surplus agriculture produce, but they cannot, it would be not viable for them to transport such a less surplus produce into the nearby markets. So that's why these small and marginal farmers have been suffering to attain or struggling to attain the economy of scale due to very small production. And apart from that, most of the small and marginal farmers do not have adequate awareness about the market linkages, and there's also no proper market connectivity also. And all these factors have been substantially contributing to the post-harvest losses in the agriculture sector. Now, post-harvest losses means that direct income loss for the farmer. When a farmer harvested his produce, and a certain portion of the produce would be lost because of multiple reasons, the farmer would also directly lose his income on the same produce. So that was the idea behind the post-harvest loss and the need to minimize these or prevent these post-harvest losses to benefit the farmers, to double the income of the farmers. However, when we talk about the agri-logistics, strengthening agri-logistics and supply chain management right from the farm gate to the consumer, Indian Railways play a very important role. So we should not forget the role that Indian Railways can play, because when we compare the road transportation with the railways would be much more affordable for the farmers, and railways would also take the produce from the farm gate to the urban centers or to the consumers at a much faster pace. So therefore, railways can efficiently connect the urban centers and rural areas across the country. Therefore, we must utilize the potential of Indian Railways in this regard. In fact, the Food Corporation of India, which is entrusted with procurement of food grains from the farmers through MSP and managing the buffer stocks and looking after the distribution of these food grains for the public distribution system, is heavily dependent on the Indian Railways. And in fact, the Food Corporation of India moves approximately 90% of its food grains, and 97% of fruits and vegetables are actually 90% of the food grains and 97% of fruits and vegetables are actually transported by road as of now, right? So this essentially means that we are not yet fully utilized the potential of Indian Railways in strengthening the agri logistics, in managing the supply chain of the agriculture sector. So therefore, if we fully utilize the capacity of the Indian Railways, so we can substantially minimize the post-harvest losses. So in this regard, the Indian Railways had undertaken number of measures so that the farmer produce can be immediately taken to the nearby urban centers, nearby supermarkets, and connect farmers with the consumers. That was one of the key recommendation of the MS Swaminathan committee. So one such initiative was the truck on train service that was launched by Indian Railways. Okay, a truck on train service, and it actually carries the loaded trucks on the railway wagons. So loaded trucks which are being loaded with the agriculture produce, fruits, vegetables and other perishable agricultural commodities, which are being loaded into the trucks, and these trucks would be carried by the railway wagons to the nearby urban centers. And in fact, the government already made efforts to expand this particular service following a successful trail runs which involve commodities such as milk and cattle feed, which is being transported to different parts of the country. So after this success, the government has been exploring the opportunities of this particular initiative, carrying trucks loaded with the perishable agriculture items or commodities to different parts of the country. And in fact, there are also parcel special trains to transport these perishable items, eggs, fish, fruits, vegetables, and even seeds between markets and the producers. So therefore, it is very important. It has been efficiently linking the producers with the markets. However, it is very important that we need to identify the potential hotspots and then over a period of time extending these benefits to the agri centers across the world. That would substantially benefit the farmers, and that would also reduces the post-harvest losses in the agriculture sector. And reducing post-harvest losses in the agriculture sector essentially means that it would improve the incomes of the farmers and achieving the goal of doubling farmers' income very soon. And in fact, to support small and marginal farmers, Kisan Rail as an initiative was started by the government. So this Kisan Rail initiated essentially to connect the perishable, so that include milk, meat and fish production surplus regions to consumption regions much more efficiently. For example, when we talk about fish, fish is mostly produced across these coastal states. And we need to identify the potential hotspot of production, hotspots which produces these perishable commodities. And once we identify those hotspots, so we can extend this Kisan Rail program to connect the producers with the markets, with the urban centers, with the supermarkets. So therefore, that would benefit these different sections of the people and different parts of India also. And in this regard, we should not forget the role that private investment can actually play in specialized wagons, which can, temperature controlled transportation and establishment of rail side facilities for safe cargo handling are very, very important. So the government can actually collaborate with the private sector to further enhance the existing infrastructure to transport these perishable items in a much more efficient manner. Now, apart from that, it is also very, very important that we need to prioritize railways over the roadways. So why? Because railways would be much more efficient in transporting these items, these perishable commodities into the nearby urban centers, nearby supermarkets, taking these perishable items to the consumers. And railways is also much more affordable, and it is also, it doesn't come up with any emissions, we can say, because most of the railway tracks are electrified. But when we use the trucks and road transportation, that also comes with emissions and pollution. So therefore, we need to prioritize railways over roadways, and that is very, very, very important, particularly when it comes to transportation of perishable items from the agri-producing centers to the nearby consumer markets. In fact, Indian Railways is also known for its efficient transportation system and a wide network which would connect different parts of India. However, there are also a lot of untapped potential also in this, untapped potential and untapped opportunities as well in this regard, because Indian Railways role in reducing the post-harvest losses should not be undermined. So we need to recognize the potential of Indian Railways in this regard, because it would impact the livelihoods of the farmers and it would also improve the environment. How it improves the environment? As I have already explained, that the road transportation, increasing dependence on road transportation would come with greenhouse gas emissions and also pollutants into the atmosphere. And in fact, when we talk about the road transportation, it would be much more costly compared to the railway network and railway transportation. So therefore, It would minimizes the post harvest losses, increases the farmers income, and at the same time it would also benefit the environment. So therefore railways should be much more reliable for the transportation of perishable agricultural commodities. And in fact, when we talk about the emission intensity of railways compared to the road networks, Indian Railways generates up to 80% less carbon dioxide for freight traffic than the road transportation. So therefore, this significant role of Indian Railways should also be leveraged to reduce emission intensity of our transportation sector, and this would further help India to meet its existing climate commitments and emission norms as well. However, private sector's role cannot be neglected in this a particular thing, because private sector can actually play a most important role in further enhancing, improving the operational efficiency, and even strengthening the railway infrastructure through public private partnerships. So public private partnerships should not be neglected, and in fact it should be given adequate priority to further strengthen the supply chain management and even the agri logistics that aimed to reduce the post harvest losses and benefit the farmers with the adequate income on their produce. However, the union government is going to present a full budget on this month. So therefore, the budgetary allocation for the agriculture sector in 2024 budget should also aim to bridge the farm to market gap. So whatever gap that has been existing from the farm gate to market or to consumers, so this particular gap must be minimized by investing in the supply chain management in the agri commodities, and also further significantly enhancing the agri logistics. So for that, modern infrastructure is very important, and value addition support is also required from the government side. So therefore, public private partnership must be leveraged in this regard to reduce the post harvest losses in India. So however, you can clearly see some causes of the food loss or some causes of the food harvesting losses post harvesting chain. So when we talk about the harvesting, so poor production practices, the climate conditions such as sudden floods and sudden droughts, pest attacks, so all these things would lead to the loss of food during harvesting, and food storage attacked by insects, rodents, deterioration and shrinking, spoilage, humidity, improper handling, temperature. So there are number of reasons throughout the supply chain that over a period of time the total agriculture produce and its value has been diminishing. So that has been impacting the agriculture sector and the agricultural incomes of the farmers as well. So therefore, we need to look into, and these measures should also be adopted to reduce the post-harvest losses. And another important article that we are going to discuss is about 106th Constitutional Amendment Act, which Center recently approved, that provides 33% of reservation for women in the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. So this essentially aimed at empowerment of women. Now when we talk about the empowerment of women, so it deals with the political empowerment of women, because it guarantees a certain percent of seats for the women in the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. So Center has provided this through 106th Constitutional Amendment, and in fact it was one of the long pending legislation from the subsequent governments, but recently the center has passed this 106th Constitutional Amendment to provide 33%. Now when we talk about the 33% reservation for women, so it was already provided in the local bodies through 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts. So what 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act says? So they say that in the local body elections, 33% of the total total seats should be reserved for the women. However, when it comes to the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies, the total women representation is significantly less. So in order to empower women politically, the central government or the parliament has brought this 106th constitutional amendment to provide 33% of reservation for women. Now, this is the context of increasing political representation of women in India. However, if you look at the practices of women's representation across the world, so recently concluded elections in UK, Britain, a record 263 women MPs. So that amounts to 40% of the total MPs in recent Britain elections have been elected to the House of Commons. Right, so when we look into the Britain Parliament, so there is a lower house, House of Commons, and there is also an upper house, House of Lords. So therefore, it is a significant increase in the representation of women in Britain. And similarly, in South Africa's National Assembly, 45% of total candidates are women. Right, so women has a 45% of representation in our South Africa National Assembly. In fact, US House of Representatives also has 29% of representation for the women. And in fact, when we talk about the universal suffrage, so it was achieved throughout different parts of the world after a prolonged political movements. So when I say universal adult suffrage or universal adult franchise, so it essentially means that voting rights for everyone irrespective of gender, race, language, religion, place of birth and sex. So irrespective of those distinctions, every individual who is above 18 years of age in India is allowed to or is eligible to vote. So that is known as universal adult suffrage. And earlier during 20th in the first half of the 20th century and 19th century, there was no such universal adult franchise. If I can tell you that by 1935 in India, only 10% of the population have the voting rights. So therefore, you can imagine that this was not a universal suffrage. So rather, this universal suffrage across the world is achieved through prolonged political movements by different sections of those respective societies. And we need to understand the trends in the women representation of independent India. So what was the trends in the representation of women in the independent India? Now, when we look into these terms, so India is a sovereign republic. India had its own constitution, and in fact the constitution has also provided a right to vote for all its women. Okay, so from the first general elections 1972 onwards, so all women in India who is about 21 years, earlier it was 21 years, but if through 69th Constitutional Amendment Act, it was reduced to 18 years through during the Rajiv Gandhi's tenure. So therefore, who is above 21 years, irrespective of race, religion, caste, language, place of birth, gender, everyone who is above 18 years or 21 years of age, so were given the voting rights in the first general election. So women were also given the voting rights in India. So however, if you look at the percentage of women representatives in Lok Sabha, so it is a very poor numbers, right? So it represents a very poor number. So for example, it was very low, between 5% to 10% till 2004. From 1952 to 2004, the total women representatives were hovering around 5% to 10% in Lok Sabha. However, it marginally increased to 12% in 2014 elections, and currently in the 18th Lok Sabha, it stands at 14%. Right, so it stands at the 14% in the 14th Lok Sabha elections. However, when we look into the representation of women in state legislative assemblies, so it is also very poor, right? So the national average of women representatives in the state legislative assemblies stands at around 9% only. So this indicating that in state legislative assemblies also women were discriminated, women were not given seats by the political parties, and this has also been pointing towards the fact that the political parties require inner party democracy, right? So they require inner party democracy, and these political parties should encourage women representatives, and they should also give seats to the women representatives. However, the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts, which were passed in 1992-1993, provided one-third of reservation or 33% of the reservation for women in panchayats and the urban local bodies. And in fact, it was the first step that Constitution has guaranteed 33% of the reservation for the women candidates. However, if you look at the total or the average of women parliamentarians, it stood at 24.6%. However, India still lags behind the world average of women parliamentarians, that is 24.6%. Now we will understand women MPs, how women MPs are performing across the world. Now when we look into this women MPs across the world, so two important methods are being used to provide or to ensure higher representation for women across the world. So what are the two methods through which women representation has been ensured? The first method is a voluntary or a legislated compulsory quotas for candidates within the political parties. So there are number of women candidates also within different political parties. So either voluntarily these political parties have been giving more and more seats to the women to encourage women representatives, or there are certain legislated measures which guarantees compulsory quotas for women from the part of the political parties. Secondly, there are also quotas in the parliament through a reservation of seats. So this 106th Constitutional Amendment Act, which reserved 33% of the seats for women, is belong to the second criteria, that is quota in parliament through reservation of seats. 33% of the seats were reserved for the women. However, people who have been opposing quotas for women, reservation of seats for women in the parliament, have been advocating that so having a reserved quota in parliament, particularly for women, so they are arguing that if any seat or if any quota is reserved for women in the parliament, so women are actually not competing with the men based on the merit, and in fact this would also compromise merit. So that was the argument that they are putting forward. And apart from that, as the seats would be reserved for the woman, right, so every time the seat would not be reserved for the woman only, right? So it would rotates, it would changes from election to election. After each delimitation, so those seats would be changed. So therefore, as the seats would be reserved for the women, so they would be rotated after each delimitation. In fact, Indian Constitution also held that after each census would be done, a delimitation commission would be appointed to redraw the constituencies to conduct the elections. So therefore, when we have been reshuffling these constituencies, so there is no guarantee that woman candidate would continuously be one particular constituency would be completely reserved for the woman or continuously reserved for the woman. So therefore it would reduce the incentive for the MPs to work hard to nurture their constituencies. And in fact, so we have some neighboring countries, Bangladesh and Pakistan, and in Bangladesh and Pakistan also a certain quota of seats were reserved for the women in their respective parliament. However, it does not bring in a significant improvement in the women representation or a political empowerment of women in those respective countries. But on the other hand, if we look into the opposite side of it, so there is an evidence and there is also a significant improvement in the constituencies where women parliamentarians were elected, right? So from the infrastructure perspectives, women empowerment perspective, so there is a visible sign in those respective parliamentary constituencies that these women parliamentarians could actually do something to improve or to develop those respective constituencies. However, so we will understand this 106 Constitutional Amendment Act. So this particular Constitutional Amendment Act that was passed in September 2023 provided at least 1/3 of the seats or 33% of reservation of seats for the women in Lok Sabha and State Legislative Assembly, as I have already discussed about this. In fact, it is expected through the 106th Constitutional Amendment Act that it would ensure a fair representation of women in the legislature, right? So it would ensure fair representation of women in the legislature, and in fact that would also increase the gender sensitivity in their parliamentary process and even the legislation. So we bring in the gender perspectives into different legislations that the parliament passes, right? So women very often recognized as a vulnerable category of people in the society. So therefore bringing in the women perspective due to increased number of women representatives in the parliament is also a welcome step from the parliament. However, hopefully it is expected to increase the number of women ministers also in both center and state governments, right? So increasing women members essentially means a political empowerment of women, more sensitization. It would inspire other women, right? So it would also help in education of women, and it would also reduces the dropout rates among the women, right? So in fact it would have a chain effect and the multiplier effect on the overall empowerment of the woman. So the census, which is overdue since 2021, so census actually the center should conduct the census in 2021, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the center did not conduct census in 2029. Rather, 2026, it is expected that the census would complete, or the government would announce the census data. Okay, so this census should be conducted without any further delay to ensure that the reservation for women as early as possible, as quickly as possible, and it is also expected that this 33% of the reservation should be implemented from 2029 general elections itself. So you can also go through the timeline of women reservation bills which were introduced previously but not passed because of number of other reasons, right? So next important article is with respect to state of India's informal economy, right? So if you look at the informal sector in India, we can say that the 90% of India's economy is informal economy, and more than 85% of its employees are working in the informal sector or unorganized sector. So therefore we should not undermine the role informal sector actually plays in India's GDP, increasing per capita incomes of individuals who have been involved in the informal sector, and providing social security and social safety nets through adequate livelihoods to the people who have been engaged in the informal sector. And at the same time, the informal sector has also significantly contributing to India's total exports. So therefore we have to recognize the role that the informal sector has been playing, and as an economy we need to bring in structural reforms so that would reduce the informal nature of India's economy and promote the formal economy. It would promote the formal economy or a structured or organized economic nature. So we'll understand the context. The context is that recently National Sample Survey Office 2122 published a survey, right? So it has published a survey, and this particular survey reveals that the effect of a significant economic shocks that the informal sector has faced, or the Indian economy overall faced, due to demonetization, GST, and implementation, and the COVID-19 pandemic, on overall Indian economy in general, and particularly on the informal economy, and that has led to the job losses and reducing the productivity on the part of this particular informal economy, right? So we need to understand what are these unincorporated enterprises, or informal enterprises, or enterprises which are part of this informal sector. Now, unincorporated enterprises are informal businesses or unorganized businesses. So they are not a registered companies with the government, right? So they are not registered companies. Now, when we talk about this informal sector companies, they actually include MSMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises, household units, own account enterprises, and partnerships. So they are actually operating outside the formal regulatory frameworks, but they have been contributing significantly to employment and economic activity in India, right? So they are one of the largest providers of employment opportunities, and they are providing livelihoods, gainful employment opportunities. They are also contributing to India's GDP, India's exports, wealth generation, and they are also absorbing the economic shocks, and they are also much more resilient compared to the formal sector. So therefore, because of that reason, we should not undermine the role that the informal sector can actually play in this regard. However, survey results have to be taken into consideration. Now, why these survey results are important when we are taking into consideration the informal sector? Now we will understand some key characteristics of the informal sector. Now, what are these key features or key characteristics? For example, the informal sector very often have unsafe working conditions. So there is no such guarantee that the informal work would provide a safe working condition. So we can say that the poor working conditions in the informal sector. So that is one characteristic. And low level of skills, even if you don't have the formal skilling, you can be part of the informal sector. And low and irregular incomes of people who have engaged in the informal sector. And there is also no job guarantee. When you are being part of the informal sector, there is no job guarantee and no written agreements also, right? So you can join the informal sector at any time without an agreement, and you can also leave the job without any restrictions or limitations. And it is largely composed of marginal labor with a very minute or limited wages. And in fact, it is easy to enter into this informal sector, and it is also labor intensive. It is not technology intensive, not capital intensive, rather it is labor intensive, and it lack access to the institutional credit and small scale operation and unregulated markets. So these are key characteristics of the informal sector. So however, when we look into the survey data or timely insights which are being provided by the National Sample Survey Office with respect to the informal sector, the survey results actually offer a crucial data or crucial evidence of understanding the evolving role that the informal sector can actually play in the Indian economy with respect to job creation, right? So how gainful employment opportunities are being created by the informal sector, particularly during the economic slowdown or economic shocks that we observed during the COVID-19 pandemic, lockdowns, and GST implementation and demonetization that the center has implemented, right? So therefore, it would lead to the economic slowdowns when the formal sector employment may decline. So right, so they can actually withstand such shocks, However, this particular data would also help in impact assessment as well, right? So they actually provide a detailed analysis of how significant economic events like demonetization, GST implementation, COVID-19 lockdowns have actually affected this informal sector, and it also highlights the vulnerabilities and the resilience of this particular informal sector to various causes. However, the findings from the National Sample Survey Office actually inform the policy making with such data, with some evidence, and that would aim at supporting and regulating the informal sector, and also ensuring that the measures to address its unique challenges and even contributions to overall economic stability and the inclusivity as well. So the insights that are being provided by the National Sample Survey Office are very, very important in this regard particularly. However, we need to understand the pattern of informal employment across states that these small scale and informal industries have been creating. The NSS4 data has been showing that there is a mixed pattern across different states. So 16 states out of 34 have shown a decline in the informal sector workers in 22-23 compared to 2015 and 16. Around 63 lakh informal enterprises shut down due to the GST implementation between 2015 and 2016 and 2022-23. See, because these informal and small scale companies or firms have to withstand the challenges of implementing the GST, and because of that reason it led to the shutdown of these industries. Now whenever these enterprises are shut down, so people who have earlier dependent on these enterprises for their employment, so they lose their employment, they become unemployed, and they have to search for alternative employment opportunities. So in fact, the GST implementation has led to the around job losses of around 1.6 crore individuals. So in this context, what should be the way forward? So the way forward should be the government should provide targeted support, incentives, and even hand holding support to help this informal enterprises to adapt the post GST and post pandemic environment, so that we can revive the informal enterprises. And apart from that, it is very important that the policy makers should actually look for the ways, so those ways actually aim to facilitate a gradual transition of informal enterprises to the formal sector. However, in this regard, the government has launched several initiatives to formalize the existing informal economy in India, such as introduction of GST. However, later it comes with a lot of challenges for these informal industries, and digital payment system, production linked incentives program, Make in India program, PM Vishwakarma scheme, E-Shram portal, labor codes were introduced, PM Swanidhi, Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Man Dhan Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi, and World Bank support to India's formal working class. So all these are initiatives that the government has launched to formalize the existing informal sector in Indian economy. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.